Next question. There is growing sentiment that a potential solution to the Commonwealth's financial woes is to either tax nonprofit businesses and organizations or change the eligibility criteria to make fewer businesses tax exempt. Would you support legislation to access this revenue stream? If yes, why? If no, why not? We begin with Richard.
Yes, I will. And let me also preface this with, I know what it's like to be in a nonprofit. I currently help run one of these nonprofit organizations, the Quaint Corner Children's Museum. And so I take care of all the financial, the business, and the payroll aspects of that organization. Before that, I was the treasurer of another organization, the Juniata Civics Association. Not only do I help professionally with these nonprofits, I also have a history of helping them out, giving endless hours of my own time to help these community organizations. So when I say that, yes, these organizations do need to help pay their way, it's also because I understand that government also has a responsibility to the rest of the community, These organizations and nonprofits also provide demands on the city services, such as police and fire protection, road repaving, and all of that. If they're not paying their fair share, then that just means that that burden gets passed on unfairly to the rest of us. So we need to make sure that everybody is paying their own fair share. Now, at the same time, I've also heard from city officials, and I've seen the presentations in the Act 47 coordinator, that Altoona does indeed have 1/3 of its properties that are untaxed. I think we do need to do something about that. At the same time, I recognize that many of these organizations are charitable organizations. They don't have the money to pay taxes. And so this is why I support pilots, the payment in lieu of taxes. There are organizations in town that are already supporting pilots. We need to make sure that we continue to support these pilots, and we do what we can at the state level to encourage that. Without pilots, these nonprofits, as I said, would be passing their fair share of police and fire protection off to individuals, and that's not fair to them either. So I also know that it's not fair for the nonprofit business to be undercut, it's not fair for a for-profit business to be undercut by a nonprofit business. And so I also believe that we need to look very carefully that if there is a nonprofit business which is not paying taxes and they're providing the very same services that a for-profit company is providing, then that's not fair either. That's not fair to the businessmen who can't compete with the for-profit company. So we need to make sure that we do something there. So thus again, I'm going to listen to the community and to the city leaders to help craft new legislation to make sure that Pennsylvania's law governing tax-exempt status will be moving forward, not moving backwards, and that it will be moving forward in a way that's going to benefit our community. This is especially important in light of the Pike County case that went forth before the Supreme Court. That's really basically changing the whole way we look at nonprofit status.
Thank you. John?
I want to be clear, I'm on the record. I think we should go forward and not backwards. I listened intently to what Richard said and started out in agreement with what my remarks are, and simply this. When the government provides a service to an institution or to a person, that person and those institutions should pick up the cost of that service. So it's perfectly reasonable to expect not-for-profit institutions, if they're getting fire protection, if they're getting police protection, if they're getting city services, to pay for that. And the church I go to would be happy to pay for that. Well, not happy, but we would do it. We would do it. We have that commandment, thou shalt not steal. So let's not, freeload off of our fellow taxpayers. Let's do our duty. Let's do our civic duty and pay for the services that we're receiving from our government. That's perfectly reasonable. And I thought Richard was saying that, but then he said, wait a minute, some of these things are charitable institutions, and they don't have the money to pay taxes. Oh, so we're going to exempt those. And who are we not going to exempt? Ultimately, it comes down to the hospital. But where does the hospital get its money from? Sick people. So is that what's being advocated here, is we tax sick people to get Altoona out of financial distress? No, this is our community, and everybody that gets benefits ought to be paying their fair share of the cost. That's common sense government right there, folks, not exempting out and carving out exceptions. A rule's a rule, and a duty's a duty. And that's what we should be doing going forward, making sure that if we have necessary expenses, that they're covered in an appropriate and fair way.
Thank Rebuttal, Richard?
Yeah, I don't think that I actually mentioned that anybody should remain exempt. What I believe I mentioned is that I understand the position that nonprofits are in, even charitable organizations, because like I said, I help run one. And so I do understand the tight budgetary constraints, but I also understand the tight budgetary constraints that the city is under. And if you were listening, that's what you would have actually heard. There is one case that I think that we should seriously look at exempting, though. And that's our public schools, because public schools are funded purely by taxpayer dollars. If they're going to turn around and pay property taxes based on property tax revenues that are coming in, it's really just going around in circles, and there's only one person who's actually going to get money from that, and that's going to be lawyers and accountants. And so that's the one case where we do need to make sure that that remains tax exempt, because otherwise we're taxing taxes and taxing taxes, and basically the accountants are going to get the money, and it just siphons off the top from everybody. Thank you.
Well, again, if a school is getting benefits from our local government, why shouldn't they pay taxes? And yeah, you say you're taxing the taxpayers, but to not is simply to hide an additional cost that the school is imposing on our community. Let's have a little transparency. And let's do cost accounting as it's done according to the book. Whatever you're incurring cost-wise, it should be on the books. And if that means that you have to tax the taxpayer and there's no additional cost here because the tax system is already in place, that's, again, just a matter of bringing transparency and accountability to the operation of a public institution. Who's against that?
Thank you. Statistics show that every dollar spent on early childhood education yields $16 of benefits later on. Yet Pennsylvania seems more intent on cutting funding that provides educational advantages to its future workforce, while at the same time increasing funding for prisons and juvenile justice programs. What is your feeling about early childhood education, and would you be likely to support initiatives aimed at raising the levels of government investment in early childhood programs? We begin with John.
The first question about early education is it affordable? People earning up to 300% of the poverty level are eligible for expenses that they incur. Next thing you know, we'll be having 25-year-olds put on their parents' health care program. And don't laugh, it could happen. All right? Is it effective? This is novel economics if you're telling me there's a $16 return for every dollar invested. This is from a recent article in Education Week. We learned that the $7 billion Head Start preschool program, and by the way, Head Start's been in place since 1965, so we have plenty of data on Head Start. It produces far fewer positive effects on participants' lives than its advocates have assumed. A rigorous study found that the program, after producing some initial gains during preschool, had almost no effect on children's cognitive, social, emotional, or health outcomes at the end of the first grade compared with a control group of children. Now, what they go on to next in this article in Education Week is to say that we have no proven successes. Let's keep spending the money and maybe we'll find one. Again, it's not your money that you're spending. It's somebody else's money. If you have a good educational program, invite donors to come in. Invite parents and children to participate. But again, we have to ask, is it affordable? We have to ask, is it effective? And then we have to ask, what are the associated costs? I mean, everybody recognizes that the highest correlation with student academic achievement is parental involvement. This offloads parental involvement before the kid's even in kindergarten. Let's get the parents more involved. And in those hard cases where parents are negligent or otherwise unavailable to provide appropriate care for their children, well, we'll look at those on a case-by-case basis. But to institute a statewide program to wrap up everybody and throw them into this without, again, folks, we don't have the money. Let's start there. We're tapped out. We are tapped out. The household expenditures at the state level, $130 billion across the state, local government. There's 5 million households. Do the math. That's $26,000 per household in taxes. We need to start thinking differently. We need to actually start looking back to the family to provide the necessary services that it's their responsibility to do so in the first place.
Thank you. Richard?
Early childhood education is particularly effective for children of low-income families. As you said, the High Scope Preschool Project shows that $1 of expenses does yield $16 of savings long-term. We've known that for over 40 years, poverty is the actual #1 factor in determining a child's future, not the parents' involvement in their kids' education. But of course, these really go hand in hand, because a child that's in poverty means that their parents are working not one job but multiple jobs, and so obviously they're not at home. They're working their jobs, and they're not able to spend the extra time at home that someone else who makes more money is able to spend with their children. In addition to that, the research has shown that there is a causal relationship between being poor and doing well in life. It's not because poor children cannot learn. It's because these children just have fewer opportunities at home to learn in their home for various reasons that many of us take for granted, such as having role models, the vocabulary that's speaking to them at home. Early childhood education allows these children to gain some of these enriching learning activities that set the stage for increased learning later on. This is a great investment in the future. Now, you're right that Head Start has been around for a long time. And so, since it's been around for so long, I'm surprised that you quoted a study that actually looked at what kids do in preschool to what they do in first or second grade, because that's only a time period of about 3 years. Because they've been around for so long, we should be looking at timescales of 20 years, 30 years. And when you look at those timescales, we find out that what early childhood education does is it's not necessarily about teaching kids rote memorization or learning their multiplication tables or learning vocabulary. It's about learning a new way to learn. It's about fundamentally changing the way the brain actually works. Adults who have had early childhood education, this is early childhood education, pre-kindergarten. We're 4 times more likely to actually attend college and get a college degree when other factors such as poverty were accounted for. Adults with that early education, they basically grow up to go to college, to get a college degree and have greater earning potential. That is what's going to drive our economy. This type of investment, this type of $1 investment to have a $16 return, this is what we need to do. Not only do we have a $16 return on investment because these children are then getting a really great education, not just in up to 3rd or 4th grade. They're getting great education all the way through life because we're changing fundamental habits at an early age. We're changing the way the brain of an individual child gets wired up together to basically to learn and to educate themselves. So when we do that, we also have dramatic decreases in what we have to pay for disability education. And so students or children with slight disabilities without getting early childhood education often have to go through school with special education that's very expensive. The kids who get the early childhood education, the intervention at a young age, are then able to go into school and get the same schooling that everyone else gets, and that saves the taxpayer dollars. Again, this is part of that $16 return on investment.
John, rebuttal?
Well, I'm glad to hear my opponent is full in favor of choice for poor people. He said that what's harmful for poor people is they don't have the same options as people like he has. So I'm glad to hear that, because I want choice for all kids in this Commonwealth to choose the best educational opportunities that they can make use of. I'd also say, if it's really true, if these people who are pushing this $16 return for $1 investment, if it's really true, why aren't they promising us a rebate? Why aren't they saying, let us take $1 from the budget here and we'll return $15 there? Oh no, that's not what they're promising. They're saying, we get $15, $16 now, and we want another one. We want $17 from the taxpayer. If it's really that effective, if it really gives that return, let's put the money there, but let's not take it out of the taxpayers' pockets additionally. Let's move it from someplace else in the budget.
Thank you. Richard?
You know, you're not really for choice. You're just for abolishing public schools. As you just said, even when parents get involved, you said that's the #1 criteria, but you've also written that even when parents are involved in public school education and are involved in their education and schools are efficient and make good use of resources, you still think that public schools are an abomination of the public, that they're somehow a moral failure of society. I find that ridiculous. The state constitution mandates that we provide an effective education to the public, and that's for good reason, because education is the best investment that we can make. I'm a supporter of education, not just normal K-12 education, but pre-K as well as post-graduation education, all the way up to medical school, frankly. So we need to provide that because that is the best investment that we can make in our future.